Hello, welcome back to this week's episode of Closed by Mo. My name is Mohammed. I'm hopefully your favorite YouTube host on most things real estate. In this week's episode, we're going to be very similar to what we had done last week in terms of tips for buyers that are entering the 2024 market, except now we're going to be talking about sellers. So if you are watching this video and you own property that you're thinking about selling in 2024, especially in the summer of 2024 because you want to capitalize on the fact that more buyers are entering the market, then keep watching this video for my top 2 to 3 bits of advice on anyone that's considering selling their property, whether it's a single family home or it's a big commercial property, whatever it is. Keep watching and I hope you get some value from this video. Let's jump right into it. Now, this video is going to be a little bit easy for me to make because the advice that I would give sellers going into the 2024 summer market is very similar to the advice that I would give buyers that are going into the summer market as well. To start us off with, I always tell my clients, look at what the data is telling us. Don't just think about how you feel. Now, it's very difficult as a property owner, which I completely understand, for you to be able to look at data that would somehow be contrary to what you might believe is the true valuation of the property. One thing I've noticed that a lot of property owners do, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, because it shows that they put a lot of effort into their home, is that you might think that just because you've invested a ton of money in renovations or maybe putting like a swimming pool in the backyard or a jacuzzi here or whatever it is, you might think that your property is automatically worth a lot more. And in a lot of cases, it definitely is. But you have to understand that when we look at like property valuations, you have to look at what the buyer is looking at in that particular market. So in effect, what I'm trying to say is you can't really out remodel or remodel out of a specific area or neighborhood or even property type. Meaning, you can't expect to put a gold bathtub in a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in an area where most 3-bedroom, 2-bathrooms are selling for $100,000 and automatically assume that that gold bathtub is now going to make your property worth a lot more. That's just not the case. Again, that's just a very hyperbole example, but effectively what I'm saying is you can't remodel out of a specific area or property type or classification. Now, to dive a little bit deeper into what I mean by looking at what the data is telling us, when you sit down with your broker, if you are using a broker to figure out, okay, how much do you think or how much do we think we can actually get for our property, a good broker should be looking at a few things. Number one, obviously looking at comps. And when I say comps, I don't mean by homes that are currently on the market. I mean homes that have technically, legally sold, transacted on, traded on over the last 6 to 12 months. Those are the properties that you want to be focused on. And even more in depth, you want to be looking at similar properties. For example, if you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that's built like a ranch or built like a colonial or like whatever it is, a bungalow, whatever it is, you want to be looking at ideally properties that fit that category and style. So that's the kind of comparable or comps that you want to be sort of looking at to help you really pinpoint what the final sale price of your property is most likely going to be. Now, there's always going to be fluctuations up and down because the data that you're going to be using is going to be based on transactions that have happened over the last couple of months. It's very rare to find the exact same identical property with the same features, renovations, build quality, renovation quality, all that extra amenities that's sold for a very quite recently to when you're thinking about listing it. That just rarely ever happens. So we have to look at what the data is showing us in terms of similar properties that have transacted over the last few months, and then sort of extrapolate off that. For example, if we find a property that's very similar in looks to yours in terms of condition, but the lot size is a little bit bigger, maybe that means, okay, then for your property, the final sale price is probably going to be a little bit smaller, maybe not as big of a difference because the actual structure itself is very similar. Other things or data points that you should also be looking at is obviously the median time that a property sits on the market, the absorption rate data, how quickly is the current inventory being gobbled up by the demand to help you get a good understanding of how strong demand is. One bit of, I would say, easy to look at data to figure out whether or not the property market is hot in your particular neighborhood, school zone, district, whatever it is look at the number of listings that are currently available, but even more so, look at how long a particular listing has been on the market. One thing that I would also advise my clients that have maybe a very unique feature in their home that they bought the house with is look at how long the house sat on the market when you were in the market to buy it, and think about whether or not that had any contributing factor, whether it's how long it sat on the market or how little it sat on the market. That should be things that obviously are, what you should keep in the back of your mind. On top of overall condition and features, clearly if you see that all your neighbors' homes sold for a much higher price point, but when you go and look online, you see that their pictures show that their interior is a lot more renovated, you shouldn't expect your house to obviously fetch the same price. You should definitely adjust your expectations. The second bit of advice that I would give anyone selling their house or thinking about selling their house in 2024 is, understand like where your property sort of ranks in the entire spectrum. It's very similar to a buyer that I would tell them, understand where your offer ranks. But as a seller, you should understand where your property ranks. Now, going back to the same example of a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, if you know that your house needs work or that you haven't done any remodeling work, no renovations, no upgrades to any of this, the house's mechanicals like the boiler, maybe hot water tank is outdated, maybe the roof is outdated. If you know these things and you know that you haven't really been able to take care of the house as much as, let's say, a nicer house would, don't expect to get top dollar for it unless there's any other kind of really strong redeeming factor, right? Like maybe your house is like the smallest house in like a multi-million luxury residence neighborhood, whatever it is. But those are obviously far and few in between, and more so the outliers and the data points. So definitely adjust your expectations of where your property ranks effectively, especially so if you know you haven't really done too much work to update the mechanicals. Now, I want to make something very clear here. Keeping mechanicals updated, doing regular renovations, updates, upkeeping of the house, those are very normal things. I'm not talking about the remodeling aspect of it in terms of putting in, let's say, a gold bathtub in the house and assuming that the property is going to sell for more. I've seen people put in swimming pools in areas in neighborhoods where buyers that are shopping in that area don't really expect a swimming pool in the area, and they're not really shopping for that because the buyers that are looking in that area have a very specific price point that they're looking for, and that's why they're looking in that area. Otherwise, they would have looked at other areas maybe where of a higher price point or lower price point, right? It's a give and a take. The third thing that I would also definitely urge you if you're thinking about selling your house in 2024 is listen to what your broker's anecdotal experience is sort of telling you. This is why it's so important to work with the right people, because the right broker will be able to tell you, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, I know you want X amount of dollars for this home, but what I'm looking at when I'm working on all these other transactions that I've gone under contract with or I've sold for, here are the concessions that the sellers have made, here are the concessions that the buyers have made, and here's the middle ground that we sort of reached on. I'm just sharing that with you because you need to know that, not just based off of what the data is telling us and how you feel, but also what the anecdotal experience is telling me from having worked in the trenches and worked on deals to try and get them across the finish line. This is what I'm seeing has worked best. And this is where the right broker comes into play, because the right broker is going to be the bridge between where your expectations are and where market reality is. Market reality could be higher or lower than your expectations. The broker is going to be the bridge between those two to help you make sense of the market, especially if it's your first or second, or if you haven't sold a property in a very long time. With that, guys, I hope you really enjoyed this video because I tried to keep it very broad that will, hopefully be applied to a spectrum of homeowners or property owners that are thinking about selling for the very first time. Anyways, I'll catch you guys next week. If you have any questions or if you're thinking about selling your house and you're in New York City and Long Island, I might know a guy. Just scroll down to the comment or the description section below, should I say. All my information is there. Bye-bye.